Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second luncheon sponsored by AT&T. If you all would kindly please find your seats. I wouldn't sit down quite yet because I'm just going to have you pop back up here in a second. And we will actually just, like I said, roll right in and get started with Miss Julie Bradley and our national anthem. So if you all please rise.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets rang clear, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you, Julie, for that wonderful rendition of the national anthem. At this point, I'd like to call forward Chaplain Colonel David Carr, Command Chaplain, U.S. NORAD and U.S. NORTHCOM, to give us an invocation. Chaplain.
Please join me in prayer. Almighty God, today we honor you and we remain humbly thankful, always grateful for life and for your plan for us. May your will be done on earth, even as it is in heaven. We give you thanks for our nation today, for family, for faith, for freedom, for friends, and for colleagues. And during this week, we corporately celebrate cyberspace and the reality that because of incredible technology, keen minds, visionary thinkers, bold pioneers, and of course your blessing, that we can celebrate this in a way which just a few decades ago we could not. So grant us wisdom, God, to use this incredible tool as a way to project power for prudent purposes in promoting peace and in protecting our people and in defending our homeland. God bless this week together and the meal we're about to receive for our health and for our well-being. We humbly pray. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. You can please take your seats. I'd like to now introduce our head tables, head table number 1, and our keynote speaker for today, Lieutenant General Jay Silveria, Superintendent, U.S. Air Force Academy, Lieutenant General Chris Wegeman, Air Combat Command Deputy Commander, Major General Kim Kreider, U.S. Space Forces Mobilization Assistant, Major General Kevin Kennedy, Air Force Assistant Deputy CIO, Mr. Brendan Criswell, AT&T, Mr. Lance Spencer, AT&T, Mr. Mike Finn from Deloitte, Lieutenant General Retired Jim Soligan from Deloitte, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Vanessa Johnson, our RMCS20-Lt President for this chapter, Lieutenant Colonel Retired Phil Parker, your Chairman for this year's symposium. At head table number 2, Major General Paul Moss, Guard Assistant to Cybercom Commander, Brigadier General Jill Lannon, Guard Advisor to SAF CIO, Brigadier General Chad Radigi, ACC A6, Colonel Kevin Johnson, AFMC A6, Colonel Andrew DiPolito, USAFE A6, Lieutenant General Retired Robert Shea, AFC International President, Mr. Mike Leff from AT&T, Mr. Paul Young from Deloitte, and Miss Michelle Steele, also from Deloitte. Please all give them a hand. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned before, we're on a bit of a tight schedule, so please go ahead and begin your meals while I ask Cadet First Class Sears Schultz to come up and introduce today's keynote speaker. Cadet Schultz.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Lieutenant General J. Silveria currently serves as the Superintendent of the U.S. Air Force Academy. In this position, he directs a 4-year program of military training, academics, athletic, and character development programs for over 4,000 cadets, leading to a Bachelor of Science and commission as a second lieutenant. In his prior position, he was the Deputy Commander of U.S. Air Force's Central Command, in which he was responsible for the command and control of air operations in a 20-nation area in Central and Southwest Asia. With over 30 years of service in the U.S. Air Force, General Silveria is a 1985 graduate of the Air Force Academy. Following graduation, he completed undergraduate pilot training and now has more than 3,900 hours in the T-37, T-38, F-15, HH-60, and F-35 aircraft with combat missions over the Balkans and Iraq. I am proud to call him my superintendent. Please welcome Lieutenant General J. Silveria.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon. It's a real honor to be with such a room of distinguished guests. I know that only a couple of the head tables up here were introduced, but I know that we could work our way back all the way through the room. It's a remarkable gathering. I've also had the privilege as the superintendent to come to this symposium a couple times over the past few years, and I'd like to recap a couple things that I've learned. So first off, I was here for a very famous blockchain instruction, and I was also here for a very famous Internet of Things instruction. So I can only report that I still have no idea what blockchain is, but I can pull out my phone right now and make my robot vacuum cleaner at home clean up the hallway. So I'm gaining, I'm working my way. Those of you that are unfamiliar with the United States Air Force Academy, we're just down the road on I-25. And as Cadet Schultz pointed out, that's a curriculum where we make second lieutenants. We make 1,000 second lieutenants for the United States Air Force and now for the United States Space Force. And I often say that I have the best job in the Air Force, and it's because I get to see the future. Because the cadets that I have right now in 10 years are going to be executing on the battlefield. And in 20 years, they're going to be the commander of the units in those battlefields. And since we replace a superintendent every 3 or 4 years, it means that in my cadet wing right now, I probably have a superintendent that will take over in about 2050. So I get to see the future every single day. And so it's remarkable, they're inspirational, and to that end, what I'd like to do is introduce a couple of them to you. So I have Cadet Schultz and Cadet Patel and Cadet Hanlon. Please stand, gentlemen. Cadet Patel, Cadet Schultz are on the cyber team and recently qualified for the regionals in the collegiate cyber defense. Cadet Hanlon's a computer science major, and they're here with their OIC, Captain Kate Lawal. Thank you very much for being here. That certainly is the future, and certainly that future is tied to cyberspace. And certainly everything that we do at the Air Force Academy is tied to cyberspace. And I certainly think that I would have to go back to ground my experience to start my talk here at lunch. So as it was mentioned, I started out flying the F-15. The last fighter that I flew was the F-35. And so I think there's such a huge difference that's important for us to recognize. So flying the F-15 was a lot like flying a souped-up, tricked-out American muscle car. When I moved to the F-35, that's a lot like flying a high-end electric car that's connected to all of the other cars and that's connected back and is constantly being updated and constantly being revised via cyberspace. The F-35 was all about the information. It takes unprecedented levels of information off of the battlefield. It disperses it at unprecedented levels to other aircraft. And then it recovers information at an unprecedented level. The F-35 is about information. And we'd be failing at our mission at the Air Force Academy if cyberspace and information and all of those elements weren't woven in through all of our curriculum. Now, I also know that it's important when you're a speaker to establish some credibility before you start. So I established credibility as a fighter pilot, and I established no credibility in cyber, recognizing that we're speaking at a cyber symposium. But have no fear. I'd like to walk you through for a few minutes what we're doing at the Air Force Academy in the area of cyber education. Our computer science department is run by Colonel Dave Caswell, a doctor of computer science, and he's head and the permanent professor of that department. That department has 2 credited degrees in computer science and cyber science, and was the first accredited cyber science degree anywhere in the world. There's 21 course offerings at the Air Force Academy, and we have research that's focused on security system analysis, immersive environments, artificial intelligence and autonomy, and business process automation. And we directly support the chief in a number of focus areas, and we directly support the Air Force in trying to solve real-world problems. And I would offer this to this audience. We are uniquely placed at the intersection of higher education, government, and military in the area of cyber. We have unique operational and industrial partnerships across the Department of Defense and the United States government, but also collaborating with companies such as Subic, Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, Intel, Microsoft, Facebook, Northrop Grumman, and more. In 2018, we had 200 cadets that took part in summer research with those companies, as well as with MIT, Los Alamos National Lab, the Air Force Research Laboratory, NSA, and the NRO, and other companies that also did research with our cadets. Our academic approach is designed to focus on fundamental principles rather than the technology. We have a cyber city, one of only a few in the country, a cyber range that allows cadets to apply coursework in attack and defense in realistic environments. And we focus on how cyber ops supports the joint and the multi-joint domain operations. The cadets in computer science execute a capstone project in groups of 3 to 5, where they work for an entire year to address an operational relevant problem. We've had cadets that have partnered with AT&T to develop a self-healing swarm for communications during natural disasters. We've had cadets that have partnered with Air Force Special Operations Command to provide capabilities for their many mission sets. Last year, we had 2 Rhodes Scholars graduate from the class of 2019, and both of them in computer science and are studying computer science in Oxford today. This year, we have a Marshall Scholar that is also a computer science major. In 2019, the National Security Agency cyber exercise, we were the overall winner, and in 2020, we were the winner of the U.S. Presidential Cup, which means that Army and Navy didn't stand a chance. We're leading Air Force Computer Language Initiative and Air Force AI Education and Cybersecurity Talent Management, and this year in April, please mark it on your schedules, that we will host the Joint Service Academy Cyber Summit. We stood up in the fall of 2016 Air Force CyberWorks. It's the Air Force's first design center, bringing design thinking with industry and military cyber operators, and then using the brainpower of our 4,000 plus digital natives on our campus. We apply that design thinking for creating innovative solutions to operational problems from the Air Force. That's where we're taking risk. That's where we're trying to fail fast. We're employing a human-centered design, leveraging industry and academia partnerships to develop capabilities and develop designs to increase effectiveness and reduce developmental costs. And I think this is so crucial. All of those programs are designed to provide the cadets a project-based experiential learning opportunity. And I'll say that again because we firmly believe that in our curriculum, that we need to be project-based and experiential. That's where we learn skills, and that's where we learn principles, and not to focus on knowledge and not to focus on technology. One of the other ways we're doing that is a Center for Cyber Innovation. Working with our own civil engineering and a number of generous donors, we're in the contracting process of bringing together Air Force CyberWorks, the Department of Homeland Security Center of Innovation, and the Academy's Computer Science Department under one roof in a facility that's designed to emphasize public-private partnerships with numerous high-tech laboratories. We already have over 100 industry partners that are actively engaged towards Air Force projects and Air Force operators with the cadets. But we all know that this is about enabling our future fight. And so we're also developing and standing up an Institute for Future Conflict that'll connect cadets, faculty, staff, and cutting-edge research and innovation through exposure to individuals and organizations that are thinking about the future fight. We need to continue to think critically of what's beyond the horizon, not just literally, but also figuratively. We need to establish new relationships that we've never had. We're building one with the Air Force warfighter integration capability, among others. The IFC will take professors, chief scientists, researchers, lecture series, scholars programs, and continue to work towards innovative solutions, thinking about the future fight. We intend on supporting elements of the National Defense Strategy and our mission by providing cadets and faculty those tools and experiences to better adapt to the 21st century. So it's often said that you should start talking about why, and start with why. So in fact, what I'm going to do is end with why. Everything that I've talked about the past few minutes is about preparing the cadets that you met a few moments ago, about preparing them to take on 21st century warfare. 21st century warfare will include cyber and it will include space, but it includes so many elements that we are not thinking about. And ultimately, 21st century warfare that we need to prepare these cadets for, that they will be on the battlefield in 10 years and replacing all of us, is that they have to be ready to take on complexity. Complexity is the characterization of the 21st century battlefield. So our use of cyber, our integration of space, our integration of information and all other elements and human conditions are all about complexity. The 21st century warfare will be won by those that can deal with, work with, and handle that complexity. Thank you very much, and I'm ready to take some questions. I think there's some microphones somewhere, but if someone has some questions.
You win first.
Hey, Jay, as a proud graduate, I couldn't be happier to have you as our superintendent.
Okay, can you give me a vector somewhere? Where are we at?
Hi.
Here we go. All right, thank you.
You are preparing the best for the next generation. How do you feel about their career opportunities? You've given them a specialty skill. Is the Air Force helping you in making sure that they're going to be able to carry that all the way through and serve with that specialty?
Yeah, so the question is about the specialty and about carrying that specialty to the Air Force. I think that I always say that we're in the input-output business. And in our output side of the business, we're still producing pilots. We're still producing about 40% of the graduates will be pilots. But what I think is different now is the designation of what it means to be an operator in the Air Force and an operator in the Space Force. So if I go back just a few years, if I can go back just to 2016, and I took the number of cadets that graduated into being a space operator, a cyber operator, and a remotely piloted aircraft, if I took those three and added them together, it would have been less than 40 of the graduating class. This graduating class in the class of 20, that number is going to be north of 120 if I add those three together, including 60 that are going to go to the U.S. Space Force. So there's been very much a recognition of what it means to be an operator. And so the warrior ethos that we're trying to inculcate into the cadets applies to being a pilot, cyber operator, space operator, battlefield airman, remotely piloted aircraft operator. So I think the answer to your question is we're on a good path. We're on a good trajectory from 40 to 120. But I clearly know that graph, that line is just continuing up. So we know where this is going in space, cyber, and remotely piloted aircraft. Is that what you were looking for, Suzanne? Yeah, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe a little related, sir. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. I'm Kimberly Underwood from AFCIA's Signal Magazine.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what you're seeing as far as interest from airmen going into cyber versus the more traditional preparation from the academy? Thank you.
So the question was about the interest in going into cyber. I think what we're seeing is certainly the advent this year for the class of 20 and then ultimately for the class of 21, the announcement on the 20th of December of the U.S. Space Force has generated a lot of excitement about wanting to be in that sixth service. So we doubled our space operators from 30 last year to 60. So there's a lot of interest there. Our cyber operators that we have, in the last 3 years, those have gone from 20, 30, 45 each year, and the interest each year continues to grow. Because we believe in our curriculum, by the way, in a liberal arts curriculum. What that means is all of the engineers are still taking humanities, and all of the political science and humanities majors are still taking computer science and astronautical engineer. So that STEM cognizance and then the ability to get into cyber and to get into space, since we've had a lot more openings, has really opened up that thought for a lot of cadets. Now, hopefully that's what you're looking for, yeah.
Sir, to your left.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, Brian Mace with Gartner. I'm curious, when we take things at the academy like a sport, you divide it into an offense and a defense, and then you play against each other to become better. Do we do that with cyber, and how do you see that unfolding?
Yeah, so the truth is we have the cyber team seated a couple tables up here in front of you. I think that's one of the differences that we actually bring at the Air Force Academy. I mentioned the liberal arts education. I'll come back to that piece. But we do believe that this is about cyber operations to support a joint multi-domain fight. And in order to do that, it has to be about offensive and it has to be about defensive. It cannot be about network security. It has to be about network security and then offensive operations that will be able to deliver effects that the combatant commander wants to have on the battlefield. And so I think that what I see in the cadets as we continue to develop and grow the programs is the idea of bringing a lot of the aggressiveness and a lot of the fight that we want in all of our combatants, and a full recognition that if you're fighting in cyberspace, you're a combatant. And so we very much work on that culture, on that aspect. So the real answer to your question is yes, but I think the next question there is that we want all of the cadets to be interested in cyber on an offensive and a defensive manner. Because all of the effects that we were going to produce on a battlefield can all be either added to, enabled, can be brought to bear in an offensive manner, supported by or followed with or through with cyber. And same thing on defensive. We need airmen and Space Force operators. We need them all to think about the fact that they are vulnerable and that there are opportunities. And then there's a way that we have to continue to develop the mindset that no matter what you do, you are vulnerable in cyber, but you also have opportunities in cyber. So, but please talk. There's some cyber fighters down here, so come down and talk to those guys. So. Yes, sir.
General, Jason Q-Ball Simmons, USAFE, EF Africa, A6 Charlie. Also, USAFA class of 2000.
Outstanding. Means
Thank you,
you
sir.
must be exceptionally smart and good looking. So
Yes,
I
sir.
just can't-
Thank you. My question is kind of off of that in that regard. Back in the day, if you were pilot qualified but had chose to not go that route, you had to have a complex meeting explaining why your decision was that way. But building out these airmen that you were just describing, is that still the case? And how are we propelling our future airmen to be those all-domain operators?
Right. It's a good question. The short answer to your question is no. That there's such a healthy, I guess, recognition by the Air Force, as I was talking to General Vautrinot, that the idea that operators now come in all levels. Cadet Schultz mentioned that my previous job, I was the Deputy Air Component Commander in Al Udeid, fighting the fight against ISIS in 2016. And we didn't do anything, we didn't move if we weren't involving air, space, cyber, remotely piloted, bomber, fighter, big wing, intelligence. We didn't move if we didn't include all of those. And so I think there's a very clear recognition that's not the new way of fighting, that's the only way that we can fight now. So my role as the superintendent then is to continue to motivate and inspire cadets to want to be all of those pieces where their passion is. So about 40% going to pilot training, but no, it's a volunteer only if you want to fly airplanes, and if you want to go to space and you want to go to cyber, and it's my job to also have a faculty and staff that represent all of those elements. So one of the things that we're very cognizant of is the makeup of the faculty and the staff, so that I always have space operators, cyber operators, fighter pilots, airlift pilots, battlefield airmen, logisticians, intelligence officers, etc., that can always talk to the cadets about what that career means. So the short answer is no, we're not handling it that way now. We're actually making all of those career fields available. Thank you. Thanks for what you're doing at USAFE. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Hi, Soup, Dale Myros, class of 75.
Outstanding. That means you're exceptionally good looking and smart, right?
You told me that last time and it hadn't got me anywhere.
I need a new joke. Right?
Yeah. Thanks for your time today and your remarks. I'd like to give you the opportunity to talk about how we get our cadets how we get the public into the academy, the interface that these folks are going to see with regard to public outreach, how we go about recruiting folks for these kind of career fields, and maybe even the City of Champions efforts.
Right. Well, thank you. Captain Marvel helped us out a little bit, right? I say to every young woman that I run into, if you want to be Captain Marvel, come see us. I think there's a lot of things going on about the Academy, about the outreach right now, and I could certainly go for a couple hours probably giving you all of the pieces. But as the superintendent here in Colorado Springs, when I first started here, I published within a couple months an op-ed in the paper about the fact that it's so important to me that the Air Force Academy is seen as part of Colorado Springs, and Colorado Springs sees us as part of their city and part of the Front Range. It's a remarkable city, it's a remarkable region, and all of you that are in this industry right now know how much it's growing along the Front Range, and we want to be a part of that. So a lot of the outreach that we're doing, as I mentioned, in the public-private partnerships and a lot of the industry connections are also about my intent for us to be a lot less insular as an institution. Perhaps different from 75 and 85, but we need to be a lot less insular as an institution in the development of the cadets. So how is that manifested? What does that look like? So as part of the City of Champions that you mentioned, we're in the process of working with a developer that's going to develop a visitor center outside of the North Gate. We already see 1.2 million visitors at the Air Force Academy. So, and we've actually this year expanded the visitor hours 5:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. All you need is your driver's license. Come on in, come see us, come see what's at the Academy. The way that we're interacting on the public-private partnerships is through the academic departments in so many ways. We have 27 research institutes that allow companies to work with them to set up research. And we've had cadets over the past 7 years earn about 8 different patents. Last year, over the past few years, 8 patents at an undergrad-only institution. And that only happens by doing groundbreaking real-world research, which only happens by interacting with companies and other government agencies to find requirements and to find capabilities. So I think there's a lot of outreach going on with the community. I think there's a lot of outreach going on within our academic pursuits, and it's certainly my intent to continue to do that. Now, the other thing that you talked about on the recruiting side, about how we draw in. Across higher education, there's a decline in applications in a lot of places. The demographics of high school are driving that, in that there are fewer high school students. And those of you in higher ed also know that we're all about to hit a cliff here in a few years where it's really going to drop. But at the Air Force Academy, our applications have continued to rise. We're continuing to see an increasing number of applications, and also we're continuing to see an increasing higher percentage of women applicants. 33% of the applicants right now for the class of 24 are women, which is higher than last year, which was also a record. So we know which way that's going, and we want to continue to provide outreach for women, and outreach for minorities is certainly an important part of our outreach. So does that get at some of the elements you're talking about? Thank you, and good to see you. Yes, sir.
General Ian Dickinson, fellow class of 85. What would you say are the top 3 to 5 things that you think are better than 39 years ago when you and I walked in, when you arrived? You don't get to cheat and use what you've made better.
Right.
And what one thing do you miss that is no longer a part of the experience from when we arrived?
Right. Great questions, Ian. First off, the superintendent got a lot younger when. So I think the best things that have happened at the Air Force Academy right now, the sophistication and the complexity of the degree is really unparalleled. I mean, I mentioned the patents that the cadets are getting. We were the #1 funded undergraduate research institution in the country. #1 funded undergraduate research institution, $45 million in research. When you and I were there, that wasn't even a thought. You know, the idea of research. The curriculum now is so project-based and experiential-based. You and I sat there, we received our education. At the appropriate time, we gave back an amount of it. Hopefully, we gave back enough of amount so that we didn't have to do it again, right? Now, the project base and the experiential learning is developing those critical thinking skills. Cadets that are designing and building and operating satellites, cadets that are testing and doing groundbreaking research on remotely piloted aircraft. The first RPAs to fly swarms with 25 in a DARPA exercise happened here. First government agency happened here by cadets. The cyber range that I described in the cyber city. I mean, all that's probably number one, and the experience of the education is decidedly different than when you and I were here. The program overall, from beginning to end in 47 months, is decidedly more deliberate and intentional. So you and I fought through at times where, these elements and this element and military, and that sometimes there was conflicts that we had to sort out about. We endeavor to be a lot more deliberate and a lot more intentional about what we're doing, because that's what the Air Force demands now. What the Air Force wanted in the 80s was different than what the Air Force wants now from a 2020 graduate. So I think someone walking into it now would find that different. I think someone walking in now would also find the quality, present company excluded, the quality of the cadets is exceptional. The sophistication and the depth and the breadth of the young men and women that are walking in the doors now is really unmatched. First off, these are 18-year-olds who sign up to serve our nation. Always been that way. But signing up to serve our nation at a time when most of them only know that this nation has been at war and has been engaged in conflict. That's all they've known. And so to see them sign up now is inspiring every single day. But the test scores are higher, the physical fitness scores are higher, all of the tests haven't changed, and all of the scores are consistently higher. So I think that's one thing that has changed. I think some things that people would find different is that because of the project-based element that I talked about, there's a lot more of cadets working together on things that was really unheard of. And the other point, there's no books in the library anymore. Sorry. That's not what libraries are for now, right? But I think you would find a number of collaborative spaces and cadets working together that you wouldn't have found at all during our time. I also think there's a much more realistic approach about how we handle and develop on a military training aspect, a much more deliberate, much more tied to what the Air Force wants and what the Air Force expects, about how we teach and how you train and really how you lead airmen. I mean, the way you and I were led as young cadets is not the way that you and I led airmen. You and I should be taught, cadets should be taught how to lead airmen in that same way on how they lead cadets and how they're going to be expected to lead airmen when they're officers in the Air Force. So I think those are some differences that I see coming back from then until now. Last question.
Sir?
Okay.
Jeffrey Howard,
All
Naval
right.
Academy, class of '94.
All right, outstanding. And have you recovered from going
No, sir. I'm just drying my tears on the Commander-in-Chief's trophy in Annapolis, Maryland.
Touche.
One thing we can agree on, I've had the pleasure to work with Colonel Caswell in his fantastic department, but I'm curious, what level does the overall education for all Academy graduates need to be in computer science and cyber sciences now that the Air Force is becoming so much more software enabled?
Right. Well, I think the short answer is that it has to be everywhere. And it has to be everywhere at the Naval Academy and in the West Point. And I mean, it absolutely has to be everywhere. I mean, we need to work our way through, think about this, for example. We're trying to work our way through advancing some of the computer coding and some of the computer language skills for the cadets that, just like all of us are required to take a certain foreign language, work our way through so that there is enough coding and enough computer language skills by everybody. We're driving ourselves to an open architecture world where we can all interact with that. And you need the skills in order to do that. You can't work in an isolated manner in any weapon system. So we have to develop all those skills. But I'll give you, here's one way that we're trying to think about it. Should those language skills reside in a foreign language department or the computer science department? I don't know, because I think you can arguably make an argument either way. of where you put those kind of skills. But the end result is that the cadets now, as an example, 30% of our cadets that graduate are minoring in a language. 100% of them are taking computer science, and 100% are taking some amount of language. We need to determine as a force what the right mix of foreign language, computer science. But I only know that it's going up. I only know. And Sean Buck, the superintendent at Naval Academy, he and I talk about this all the time, about, you know, that you have to provide those skills to the fleet in the same way, because everything is interconnected, and they should graduate. By the way, we talk about they should graduate with those computer skills and those computing skills. You know, newsflash, they came to us like that. They came to us like that. And by the way, this is not about the presence of the internet, that these are young men and women who grew up with the internet. These are young men and women who grew up with high-speed broadband internet, which is decidedly different. They came connected. And in some cases, we disconnect them. So we always have to work to develop on that idea that they come connected, they come already thinking about thinking about their world and thinking about warfare in that connected way. That wasn't exactly your question. I get pretty good at answering the question I wanted you to answer as opposed to the one that I was answering. Well, but thank you very much, everybody. It's been a real pleasure, so thank you very much.
General, on behalf of the chapter, we want to thank you for taking time to be with us here today. We know you had to make some adjustments to your schedule to fit us in. We really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come see us at the Air Force Academy. Thank you.
Thanks. Sir, I think your address is over there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'd like to take a few minutes to recognize all of our sponsors that make this event possible. Without their support, we would not be able to make the kinds of contributions and donations that Russ was talking about at yesterday's lunch to our local STEM programs and support education here in the area. So I'm going to name all of our sponsor companies. If you are here and a member of that company, I'd welcome you to stand up, and we'll recognize and applaud each sponsor set as a group, and then we'll move right along. So let me begin with our bronze sponsors. We have Bright Apps, LLC, IronNet, and Threat Connect. Thank you very much. For our silver sponsors, we have Avaya, BlackBerry, Fortinet, Ironbow, SAIC, and VMware. Our gold sponsors are Akamai, IBM Security, and Red Hat. Platinum are Cisco, GDIT, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and Lockheed Martin. And our diamond sponsors, AT&T, Sevco, Forescout Carasoft, Jacobs, Norseman, Palo Alto, Three Wire Systems, and Verizon. And last but not least, I'd like to recognize Deloitte, who is our presenting sponsor again this year and is also sponsoring the Capture the Flag event. We talked a whole bunch about our up-and-coming cyber warriors. Please do visit the teams that are competing right now on the floor over in the exhibit hall. And again, we'll announce the winner this afternoon at the end of today's program. Between the sponsors, exhibitors, and our attendees, we're happy to announce that this year we expect to be able to award over $350,000 to local colleges and STEM scholarships. Let's give all the sponsors one more round of applause, please. Okay, we got our guest speaker out on time, and I'm actually running just a little bit early, so please finish if you're still finishing, and just a couple of admin notes. Please note that in your program, we are actually beginning General Myros' panel at 1500 by 1530, as it says in the Pocket program. I think it's right on the website, but just want to make sure that you're in place for that if you're tracking that. When you're done here, please do make sure you spend some time over in the Verizon exhibit hall, because Akamai is sponsoring the ice cream break, and you're going to want to make sure you're there for that, because it's always popular and that ice cream goes fast. At 1400 in the Sevco Symposium Room, we will be Setting up for our next speaker after lunch, that's General Kim Kreider, who we introduced earlier at the head table. So I will see you at 1400 in Seafco. Please finish up, and thank you for attending.
To believe you could hold me down, 'cause I'm in need of something good right now. We could be screaming